Here to change that. And in this video, I'm going to show you more than 25 tips, tricks, and just things you need to know about your iPhone 14 Pro Max. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has a massive 6.7-inch display, and for most people, it's pretty hard to reach all the way up at the top of the display with just one hand without doing some crazy hand gymnastics. So that's why the first tip is to take advantage of reachability. So if you just simply swipe down right here near the dock, just swipe down, you will see that it invokes reachability, and it actually has the dynamic island all the way down here as well. So you really get access to everything just at a much lower part of the screen. So you can actually reach and pull down your control center, or you can reach and pull down your notification center easily with just one hand. So this should be enabled by default, but if it's not, go into your settings, go to accessibility, go to touch, and then you should see reachability right here. It should be the second option. Ensure that that is turned on. That way you can reach the top of your screen with one hand easily. Now, something else related to the top of the iPhone 14 Pro Max display is that I notice that I tend to press on the dynamic island on accident when I try to pull down the notification center. So for example, I do this little motion here a lot. I try to pull down the notification center from the middle of the screen because that's what I've been used to on previous iPhones, but you can't do that with the 14 Pro and Pro Max. So now you have to swipe over all the way on the left-hand side. Now, some people may have done that all along, so this may be obvious, but I don't know about you guys, but for me, I used to always just swipe down from the middle of the screen to pull down my notification center, but make it a habit now with the 14 series to pull down from all the way over on the left to pull up your notification center and also your little lock screen here. However, this tip is more applicable to those who did not use reachability, because if you swipe down to invoke reachability, you could reach the very top of the screen easily and pull down the notification center from the middle still. Now, the next tip has to do with the always on display. So you can see it just went into the always on display mode. Now, one thing to know about this is that it only appears when your phone detects that you're nearby or that your phone is faced up. So if you were to wear an Apple Watch and walk away, your phone will know when you're too far away to see the screen, and it will turn off the always on display automatically so it doesn't, drain battery life. Now, also, if you face your phone face down, the always on display will be turned off. So if I flip it over, you will see it's hard to tell, but it will be turned off when face down as well. Now, if you don't like the always on display, you can turn this off. So if you go into your settings and then go to display and brightness and scroll down close to the bottom, you will see always on, and simply turn that off. And now when you lock your screen, you will notice that it is black, just like previous iPhones, and you do not have the always on display. So the always on display is nice. However, we don't see the battery percentage on the lock screen until we tap it, and then we can see our battery percentage up top right there. And I don't like that. I mean, I feel like the whole point of having an always on display is to see like your essential information, like your battery level, the time, and maybe some notifications. But you cannot see the battery charge level by default with the always on display. You have to tap it, and then you can see your battery percentage up top. So let's change that. So if we go to our lock screen and hold down right here and then go to customize and then go to lock screen and then tap right here underneath the time, we have our widgets. And what you want to do here is add a widget for batteries. So I'm going to remove all of these, and you could add either a small one or a large one. And you can see by default, it selects to show the battery percentage for my AirPods. However, if I tap on that, I can change it off of automatic and onto just my specific device. So this device right here, I want to see the battery percentage for this iPhone, and now it will show me the battery percentage for this iPhone always on the display. So we tap on done right here and then lock our phone. You can see now, even in the always on display, I can see the battery percentage without having to tap and wake up my phone to see the battery level. Now, the next thing you need to know about your iPhone 14 Pro Max is that we now have 4 camera buttons in the camera. So we have a 0.5x, we have a 1x, a 2x, and a 3x zoom. So now you get more options for the optical zoom levels. And this is really nice to have, because before we just had a 1x, a 3x, and a 0.5x, but it's nice now to have one in the middle for a 2x zoom. And speaking of the camera, one of the biggest upgrades for the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max is the 48 megapixel main camera lens. This is a huge increase over the 12 megapixel sensor on the 13 Pros. However, by default, your pictures are still only going to shoot in 12 megapixel quality. So to actually get the full 48 megapixel resolution for still images, you have to shoot in Pro RAW, but not only that, you have to change a setting for it. So if we go into our settings and then go to camera, formats, and then right down here, you will see Apple Pro RAW. Ensure that that is turned on and then tap on Pro RAW resolution and ensure that that is set to 48 megapixels. And keep in mind, you will see that the file sizes will definitely be larger when you shoot in 48 megapixels, about 3 times as large as 12 megapixel files. So keep that in mind. So if we go into our camera application now and we were to take a photo, you want to make sure, first of all, that RAW is turned on. So if you have a cross through it, that means it's off. Press it again to ensure that RAW is turned on. And then when you go to take a photo, also ensure that if you have the macro control right there, turn that off to make sure it uses the main camera lens and not the ultra wide camera. So now we're going to take a photo. It will take a little bit more time to process than a regular 12 megapixel photo. But if you swipe up now, you will see that it took that photo at 48 megapixels, and it will show the full resolution right there, which is 6048 by 8064. And this photo size is only 46 megabytes, but it will be larger if you take, a more detailed image with a lot of colors in it. And the big benefit of shooting in Pro RAW at 48 megapixels is the fact that, look how large the image size is. So if you wanted to crop in on that image, it's much easier to do so without losing quality. You could also edit the photos much easier after you take them. So your edits are going to look more realistic, like you shoot a RAW photo on a camera, like a mirrorless or a DSLR camera. It's very similar to that. And again, be conscious of the file size. Only use the full 48 megapixel Pro RAW quality sparingly. Now, the next tip has to do with the camera bump on the back of the 14 Pro Max. And if you didn't notice, this actually sticks out further than the 13 Pro Max. So you need to be aware of the wobble, and a good way to get rid of the wobble completely is to get a case. Okay, getting rid of the wobble might not be enough reason to put your iPhone 14 Pro Max in a case, but Casetify's stylish Impact series might encourage you a little bit more. And that's because you not only get these stylish, customizable designs that Casetify is known for, but you also get 11.5 feet of drop protection from the Ultra Impact series, thanks to those little corner pieces, which are made from the proprietary EcoShock technology. So no more cracked glass or scuffed up corners when you accidentally drop your phone on the street when getting out of your car. And yes, I'm speaking from experience here. But if you drop your phone from higher than a car door, Casetify's brand new Bounce case is the most protective one of the bunch because it has drop protection up to 21 feet. And that's all thanks to these expanded bounce corners and shock absorption in the back plate and on the bumper as well. And usually for that type of protection, you need a bulky, all black and boring case, but that's not what you get with Casetify. You get these really trendy, customizable designs. And you can see here there are collabs with artists, with Disney, Stranger Things, Star Wars, and so many more. This is, you can even customize them with your name or initials. And this is just the way to get a truly unique case that none of your friends are going to have. So if you want to pick up a Casetify case for your 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max, please do not pay full price. I can get you 15% off by going to casetify.com/BrandonButch, and it will auto apply that discount code when you click that link in the description below. And thanks to Casetify for sponsoring this segment of the video. The next tip has to do with the dynamic island up top. So if you were to play some music right here and you go back to your home screen, you will notice up top it shows the dynamic island has converted, and now it shows the album artwork there to the left and a little waveform over to the right. So that's cool. And if you tap on that, it will open up the music application, or if you tap and hold, it will open up this platter right here up at the top of your screen. And there's a really nifty animation that goes in and out right there. Now that applies for every application that will show up top. So a tap opens the app, a tap and hold opens up a little platter right here. And you can even have two things showing up right there. So if I were to start a timer right here, you will see that it splits into two, and now we have two different activities going on up top. And you can do the same thing with each one. You can tap and hold to pull up a little platter, or tap on it to go into said application. And something else that's really cool is that when you're on a phone call, you will see waveforms coming from each side. So if you're in a phone call or a FaceTime call, you will see the yellow waveforms when you talk and green waveforms when the person on the other line starts talking. remaining. You'll also see things like turn-by-turn directions come out of the dynamic island, which is great, so you don't have to go into the Maps application to see your directions. You'll also have live activities show up here. So if you wanted to follow a sports game, you could see the score always up in the dynamic island without having to go into that application. You'll also see things like third-party support as well. So for example, we have Apollo, which has this cool little character kind of walking around the top of the dynamic island. So you can do a lot with it. A lot of third-party applications will also tie into it. So just keep checking back, keep trying things out with the dynamic island. But the main thing to know is that it really just makes multitasking even easier. And it's really nice to have convenient access to your activities going on up at the top of your phone. And perhaps the best thing about the dynamic island is that we finally get rid of the low battery alerts having a huge pop-up in the middle of our screen. That was always one of the most annoying things in iOS. So thankfully that is now in the dynamic island. We now see that alert in the dynamic island, and we don't have a big pop-up on our screen that shows us when we have 10 or 20% battery remaining. Now, as you use the dynamic island a lot, you're probably going to notice that you smudge up your camera. So you're going to be touching around your camera a lot. And I've had a lot of people ask me, is this going to affect the front-facing camera, the quality, because you're smudging around that camera so much? Wouldn't it impact the quality? And no, photos appear the same, even if this is super dirty and smudgy. So if I smudge that up real quick and I go into my camera and I switch it around to the front, you will notice that the quality is full quality. We don't have any smudging over it like we do on the back cameras. So smudging, Apple thought about that. There may be some algorithm in there that, bypasses any type of smudging, or it could just be because that is under the screen and a little bit of smudging is not going to impact that front-facing camera. So if you were worried about that, don't worry about it. It can be as dirty as it can be, and it will still work properly without any type of smudge marks on that front-facing camera. And same with a screen protector, by the way. I had some people also ask me if a screen protector impacts that, and no, it does not. And I want to cancel this timer, so I'm just going to go in here and press on X. That's much easier than going into the clock app and hitting cancel. Now, the next thing you need to know about the iPhone 14 Pro Max is that we now have a startup chime just like on a Mac. So your iPhone can now make a noise when you power it up or power it down. So if you go into your settings here and then go into accessibility and then scroll down to audio/visual and then down a little bit, you will see power on and off sounds. So this is a great accessibility feature for those who are blind or for those just like me who want to add a boot up noise to their iPhone. Now you cannot customize this to sound like a Mac, unfortunately, but you do have pretty cool power on and power off sounds. Here's what it sounds like. So the next thing you need to know about the iPhone 14 Pro Max is that the internals are improved over the 13 Pro Max. So not only do we have faster 5G speeds thanks to the new Qualcomm X65 5G modem, but we also have a faster 6 gigabytes of RAM. So we have DDR5 RAM compared to the DDR4X RAM that was in the 13 Pro Max. So even though we have the same 6 gigabytes that we've had since the 12 Pros, we now have faster RAM with the 14 Pro and Pro Max. And to add on to that, the graphics performance is also improved due to better thermals on the Pro Max specifically. So Apple did not mention that the 14 Pro has improved cooling internally. So in theory, the Pro Max should dim much less frequently than the 14 Pro and any other previous iPhone. So in my testing so far, that has also been the case. I've not really noticed any dimming due to heat on the 14 Pro Max, whereas my regular 14 has dimmed under extreme heat. And part of the reason for this also probably has something to do with the next tip, which is that Apple advertised an astonishing 2,000 nits of peak brightness for the 14 Pros, which is a huge increase over the 13 Pros, which had 1,000 nits or 1,200 nits when watching HDR. However, this does not work by just turning up your brightness all the way. That is not how this feature functions. I tried that and it didn't work, and I found out that you have to actually have auto brightness turned on. So if you go to your settings and go to accessibility and then to display and text size, and then all the way down at the bottom, we have auto brightness. You want to make sure that is turned on to get that full 2,000 nits of peak brightness when you're in direct sunlight. And again, thanks to those improved thermals, I did not have any dimming in the short time that I had my brightness all the way up at 2000 nits. Now the next tip has to do with action mode. So this is a new feature that's available for all iPhone 14 models. So if you go over to the video section right here, you will notice up at the very top, we have a little glyph icon of a guy running right there, and it's crossed out by default. So if you turn that on, you will see that we get a little prompt here that says action mode is turned on. Now, if you go into your settings, and let's go to our camera settings, camera's right here, and then go to record video. And if you go down a little bit, you will see that we have a toggle here for action mode lower lights. You want to turn that on, and it says action mode will decrease the stabilization to optimize for less bright scenes. Now, the reason you probably want to turn this on is because even if you're in a really bright scenario, it's still going to say the action mode requires more light, and it can get pretty annoying and not have the best results. So I found that when I have that toggle turned on, action mode videos turn out better. So I would recommend at least just testing it out to see if your action mode shots look better when you turn on this toggle. And then something else you'll notice in the camera application is that by default, it's set to 2.8K. So in the camera app, you could simply tap on that to change the quality over to HD. So HD is unfortunately the highest quality you can do for action mode, so 1080p, and you could do that right there, and you could also change the FPS. So if you wanted to change it from 30 to 60, you could do that, or if you go to 2.8K, you could change it to 24 FPS. Let me go ahead through here, and you can see we have 24 FPS at 2.8K now. And if we swipe over to go to cinematic mode, we now have a new resolution for cinematic mode on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So if you tap on HD right there, you can see that we can now shoot cinematic video in 4K. So I have no clue why that was not an option on the 13 Pro Max last year, but now we can shoot cinematic mode in 4K at either 30 or 24 FPS. Now, if we go back to video or photo in the camera app here and we try to get close to a subject, you will notice that we have a little macro mode toggle down there in the bottom left-hand corner. It's a little flower icon, and that indicates that you could turn on or off macro mode. So if we turned it off, you can see that the ultra wide camera lens no longer focuses and it uses the main lens. But if you turn that on and you get close, your 14 Pro Max will switch over to the ultra wide camera and focus on the close subject. Now, you want to make sure that toggle is in your camera app. So if you go into your settings and go to camera and then go all the way down to the bottom, and you will see macro control. You want to make sure that is turned on, because if it's turned off, here's what's going to happen. So if you go to your photo mode, let's say you want to get close to a subject but not super close, you can see that it automatically puts it in macro mode even if you don't want it to. And I found that this can be really annoying, especially in videos. It has this really weird transition, and maybe you don't always want it to be in macro mode, but it does it automatically for you and you can't control it. So that's why you want to turn this on so you can control it and turn it off when you want to. And then to ensure that your settings stay the same every time you go into the camera app, go to preserve settings right here under your camera settings, and you want to make sure that these certain toggles are turned on depending on what you use a lot. So for example, for camera mode, it automatically resets to photo by default, but if you want it to switch over to, slow-mo or time-lapse or cinematic, if you use those a lot, that can be your default, or whatever you are in last, that will be what it stays in the next time you go into the camera application, along with things like creative controls. Macro control is definitely one you should turn on because of the setting I just told you about. And you have all these different ones right here. Action mode, you can have that turned on or off by default if you select this. And so if I have this turned on, so obviously by default it's turned off, but if I turn that on and I have preserved settings to make sure that stays the same as it was previously, if I close out of camera and then I go back into camera, you will see that it stays on even though by default it's off, but that's only because I have that setting set right there. So I would go ahead and change these to whatever you use most frequently. Now the next tip has to do with your battery charging. So if you go to your settings and go to battery and then battery health and charging, down at the bottom here, you will see we have an option for clean energy charging. So it says, in your region, iPhone will try to reduce your carbon footprint by selectively charging when lower carbon emission electricity is available. iPhone learns from your daily charging routine so it can reach full charge before you need to use it. So you can enable that if you want to, and if it's on by default, if you turn it off, you can see you can turn it off until tomorrow or turn off permanently. So that is an option you might want to explore. Now it could slow down your charging. You may not have a full charge when you go to charge your phone, so that may be a reason not to use that, but it is very similar to optimized battery charging. So I would experiment with that and just know that it's there. Now, something else to know about the iPhone 14 Pro Max is that it can hold up to 8 eSIMs. So you can have 8 different phone numbers associated with your iPhone 14 Pro Max versus only 6 on the regular iPhone 14s. Now keep in mind, you can only have 2 active eSIMs at a time, but in theory, you could have up to 8 phone numbers, 8 eSIMs on one iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now, something else you need to do on your iPhone 14 Pro Max is go to your lock screen, go to Customize, tap on your lock screen, and then go to your widgets right here. And just know that you can also add third-party widgets. So you may have to go into the application first, but you can see, for example, I have Apollo right there. I can tap on that, and I get different options for third-party applications for widgets I can add to the lock screen. And if you like browsing Reddit like I do, it's really nice to have a random subreddit to go up right there, and you can tap on that to just be in a random subreddit straight from your lock screen. So you could also add things like Parcel if you want to see your latest deliveries. You can see that straight from your lock screen, which is nice to have, especially when you're in the always on display. You could always track your deliveries right there. And just know that you could add pretty much any third-party application. Most of them are getting widgets. If they don't, they will in the future. And I would recommend just at least looking through those and adding some third-party widgets to your lock screen. Now, something else to know about your iPhone 14 Pro Max is if you take a screenshot, you will notice in the screenshot, the dynamic island does not show up. So technically it looks like you're using an older iPhone. However, if you were to have a live activity running, it does show the dynamic island. So if I play some music right here, you will see the dynamic island shifts into this little now playing platter. Now, if I take a screenshot and go into it, you can see the dynamic island does appear. So keep in mind, if you want it to show up in screenshots, you need a live activity to be running up there in the island. Now, also related to screenshots, if you tap on done, you now get the option to copy and delete. And with that, you can copy the photo, send it in your group chat, but at the same time, it deletes it so it does not clog up your photo library, which is very handy. It's already saved me a lot of space. Now, also, if you tap on the share sheet right here, you're able to rename these screenshots. Now, you can also do this a quicker way. So if you take a screenshot right here and then you tap and hold on the screenshot down at the bottom, you have the option to rename it right there. So this can be handy if you're going to save this somewhere like in your files, or if you're going to transfer it to your computer, you can rename it to whatever you want right there. And then you're able to send it or just save it to your device with that name. Another really useful tip is using voice dictation. So if you tap on the little dictation button down here in the bottom right-hand corner and you start talking, you will notice that now with iOS 16, if you stop talking, but you start typing, or you can even keep talking, but if you're typing at the same time, you can see they could add that in there. And then without typing or without tapping a button, you can see I can start talking again and it will pick up where I left off. Now, not only that, you can also have auto punctuation with dictation. So if I ask questions like, what time is it? What state do I live in? You can see it will automatically add in the punctuation right there. So that is really nice to have. Definitely makes dictation easier, so you don't have to say, question mark or period or any of that. You could also add in emojis, crying emoji. You can see there, it will add in the crying emoji for me automatically. And now to enable this, you want to go into your settings and then go to general and then down to keyboard. And all the way down at the bottom, you will notice that we have enable dictation and also auto punctuation. And then the final tip has to do with mail. So now with iOS 16, you're able to schedule emails and remind yourself of emails. So for example, if I went to compose an email right here and I tap and hold on the send button, I now get the option to either send now, send at 9 p.m. tonight, or send later. And if I tap on send later, I can choose exactly when I want to send that email. And then if we go back to our mailbox and swipe to the right, you will notice that we now have a new option for Remind Me, and you will get a reminder now in an hour, tonight, tomorrow, or at a specific time and date when you want to be reminded about an email. That way you don't forget about it. Maybe you didn't want to respond at the time, but you wanted to be reminded about it and be able to respond at a later date. You can now do that with iOS 16. Now also, if you go into your settings and then go to mail and then go all the way down to the bottom, you will see that you have undo send delay. So if you wanted to undo a message, you now have the option as well to have a longer period of time that you can undo that message. So for example, if I were to send a message, let's just send this right here. You can see down at the bottom, we have undo send. And if you tap on that, it will take you back to the draft right here. You can either just delete it or change something in that. But now you have the option to change the duration that you have where the undo button shows and that it kind of delays sending that email. And then I'd also recommend taking a look at some of these other options like follow-up suggestions and privacy protection. I would definitely recommend having this one turned on, but I covered a lot of those in my big iOS 16 video. So there you have it. Those are 25 tips and tricks that you should absolutely know about your iPhone 14 Pro Max. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for more iPhone 14